When Niccolò Machiavelli penned The Prince in 1513, he wasn't writing a manual for tyrants. He was documenting the harsh realities of how power actually works in the real world. The concept of necessary evil that Machiavelli introduced isn't about becoming a villain. It's about understanding that sometimes, to achieve greater good or to protect what matters most, you must make decisions that others might find uncomfortable or morally ambiguous. Think about this principle in the context of modern success stories. When Reed Hastings, the founder of Netflix, decided to abandon the DVD by mail model that had made his company successful, he knew it would anger customers and hurt short-term profits. Many called it corporate greed, a betrayal of loyal customers. But Hastings understood something crucial. Streaming was the future, and clinging to an outdated model would eventually destroy the company entirely. This decision, which seemed like a betrayal to many at the time, actually saved millions of jobs and created one of the most valuable entertainment companies in the world. The necessary evil wasn't about hurting people. It was about making a difficult decision that served the greater long-term good, even when it caused short-term pain. This is the essence of Machiavellian thinking in the modern world. It's not about manipulation for selfish gain. It's about strategic thinking that considers all consequences, not just the immediate or obvious ones. Consider how this applies to your own life. Perhaps you're in a job where you're surrounded by mediocrity, where taking the easy path and going along with inefficient processes would make you popular with colleagues. The Machiavellian approach would be to recognize that sometimes challenging the status quo, even when it makes you temporarily unpopular, is necessary for both your advancement and the organization's success. When Satya Nadella took over Microsoft in 2014, the company was widely considered a has-been in the technology world. The culture was competitive and internally focused, with different divisions often working against each other rather than collaborating. Nadella made what many employees initially saw as unnecessary changes, restructuring teams, changing performance review systems, and shifting the company's entire strategic focus from Windows to cloud computing. These changes were uncomfortable. Long-tenured employees had to learn new skills or risk becoming irrelevant. Some divisions that had been profitable were de-emphasized or eliminated entirely. But Nadella understood that short-term discomfort was necessary to prevent long-term obsolescence. Today, Microsoft is one of the most valuable companies in the world, and thousands of employees who initially resisted these changes now credit them with revitalizing their careers. The key insight here is that Machiavelli's necessary evil isn't about being evil at all. It's about having the courage to make decisions based on long-term strategic thinking rather than short-term popularity or comfort. It's about understanding that sometimes the most ethical thing you can do is make a decision that others might initially misunderstand or resist. Chapter 2. The Art of Strategic Patience. Machiavelli understood something that most people never grasp. Timing is often more important than talent, resources, or even opportunities. The concept of strategic patience, knowing when to strike and when to hold back, separates those who achieve lasting success from those who peak early and fade away. Look at how Jeff Bezos built Amazon. When he started the company in 1994, he didn't try to become everything to everyone immediately. He focused solely on books, even though he had grander visions. For years, investors and critics questioned why Amazon wasn't expanding faster, why they weren't trying to compete with established retailers across all categories simultaneously. Bezos understood Machiavellian patience. He was building infrastructure, customer loyalty, and operational expertise that would allow Amazon to dominate multiple industries eventually. While competitors rushed to show immediate profits and expand rapidly, Bezos was content to lose money in the short term to build an unassailable position for the long term. This strategic patience allowed Amazon to weather the dot-com crash when companies with flashier short-term growth collapsed. When the dust settled, Amazon had the resources, infrastructure, and market position to expand into cloud computing, digital streaming, artificial intelligence, and eventually become one of the world's most valuable companies. The lesson here isn't just about business. It applies to every aspect of life where you're trying to advance your position. Consider someone navigating corporate politics. The immediate temptation when you see inefficiency or poor leadership might be to speak up loudly and frequently, to position yourself as the obvious alternative. But strategic patience suggests a different approach. Observe how successful executives handle these situations. They document problems quietly. They build relationships with key stake. Warren Buffett exemplifies this principle in investing. While others chase quick gains and hot stocks, Buffett has built his fortune through strategic patience, identifying undervalued companies and holding them for decades. When markets crash and others panic, Buffett sees opportunity. When markets soar and others get greedy, Buffett remains cautious. This approach has made him one of the world's wealthiest people, not because he's smarter than other investors, but because he understands the Machiavellian principle that sustainable success requires thinking in longer time horizons than your competitors. Strategic patience also means recognizing when not to take action. Tim Cook, Apple's CEO, has been criticized multiple times for not rushing Apple into new product categories. When virtual reality became trendy, when cryptocurrency was booming, when other companies were rushing to release foldable phones, Cook maintained Apple's focus on perfecting existing products and waiting for the right moment to enter new markets. This restraint has allowed Apple to maintain its premium brand positioning and avoid the costly mistakes that many competitors have made by rushing to market with unfinished products. Cook understands that for Apple, being first is less important than being best, and being best requires the patience to wait for the right moment. In your personal career development, strategic patience might mean turning down a promotion that would give you a fancy title but dead-end your long-term prospects. It might mean staying in a challenging role longer than feels comfortable because the skills you're developing will pay dividends later. It might mean building relationships with people who can't help you immediately, but who will be in positions of influence in the future. The key is learning to distinguish between opportunities that serve your long-term strategic interests and those that merely satisfy short-term desires for recognition or advancement. Machiavelli understood that princes who chase every immediate opportunity often find themselves weakened and vulnerable when real threats emerge. Chapter 3. The Power of Calculated Relationships. Machiavelli wrote extensively about the importance of alliances and the danger of making enemies unnecessarily. In the modern world, this translates into understanding that your network isn't just about who you know. It's about strategically building relationships that serve mutual interests and create lasting value. Consider how Oprah Winfrey built her media empire. Early in her career, instead of viewing other media personalities as competitors to defeat, she approached them as potential collaborators and allies. She understood that the media industry was large enough for multiple successful players, and that lifting others up often created more opportunities for herself. When Oprah launched her book club, she didn't just pick books randomly. She built relationships with authors, publishers, and literary agents. Each book recommendation created value for multiple parties. The author gained massive exposure, the publisher saw increased sales, readers discovered new voices, and Oprah positioned herself as a cultural tastemaker. This wasn't manipulation. It was strategic relationship building where everyone benefited. This approach allowed Oprah to expand beyond television into publishing, film production, and eventually launching her own network. At each step, she had allies who were invested in her success because she had previously invested in theirs. The Machiavellian principle here isn't about using people. It's about creating genuine value for others while advancing your own position. The most successful people understand that sustainable success comes from building relationships where all parties benefit. Look at how Elon Musk has approached his various ventures. When he sold PayPal, instead of retiring or starting completely new ventures from scratch, he strategically built relationships within industries he wanted to enter. For SpaceX, he connected with former NASA engineers and space industry veterans. For Tesla, he built relationships with automotive designers and battery technology experts. Musk understood that trying to compete against established industries without insider knowledge and relationships would be nearly impossible. By building strategic alliances and bringing industry veterans into his ventures, he gained credibility, expertise, and access to resources that would have taken decades to develop independently. This strategy extends beyond business relationships. Consider how successful people approach their personal networks. They maintain relationships with people from different industries, different social circles, and different stages of their careers. They understand that the person who's junior to them today might be in a position to help them tomorrow. Strategic networking also means being selective about which relationships to prioritize. Not every person you meet deserves the same level of investment. Successful people identify individuals who share their values, who have complementary skills, and who are also thinking strategically about their own advancement. Reid Hoffman, founder of LinkedIn, exemplifies this approach. He didn't just build a social network for professionals. He strategically positioned himself at the center of Silicon Valley's ecosystem by connecting entrepreneurs, investors, and executives. Each introduction he made strengthened his position as a valuable connector, which led to investment opportunities, advisory roles, and business partnerships. The key insight is that Hoffman wasn't just collecting contacts. He was creating value by facilitating relationships between others. This approach made him indispensable to his network rather than just another person asking for favors. In your own career, strategic relationship building might mean identifying the 3 to 5 people who are most likely to influence your industry's future and finding ways to provide value to them. It might mean maintaining relationships with former colleagues who have moved to different companies or industries. It might mean building connections with people who are currently junior to you, but who show high potential for advancement. Remember, Machiavelli's advice about alliances was based on mutual benefit and strategic thinking, not manipulation or exploitation. The strongest relationships are those where both parties genuinely benefit from the connection. Chapter 4. The Intelligence Advantage. Information as your ultimate weapon. Machiavelli emphasized that a prince must be well informed about everything happening in his domain and beyond. In today's world, this translates to understanding that information asymmetry, knowing things that others don't, is often the difference between those who rise to the top and those who remain stuck in mediocrity. Consider how Michael Bloomberg built his financial empire. When he was fired from Salomon Brothers in 1981, he could have started another traditional investment firm. Instead, he recognized that the financial industry's biggest problem wasn't lack of capital or talent. It was lack of real-time, accurate information. Bloomberg understood that traders and analysts were making billion-dollar decisions based on outdated or incomplete data. By creating the Bloomberg Terminal, he didn't just start a business. He positioned himself as the primary source of financial information for the world's most successful investors and institutions. This information advantage allowed Bloomberg to expand into media, politics, and philanthropy. When you control the flow of information in an industry, you gain influence that extends far beyond that single sector. Today, Bloomberg Terminal generates billions in revenue annually, and Bloomberg himself has used this platform to become one of the world's most influential people. The principle here applies to every level of career advancement. In any organization, there are always information gaps, things that senior management doesn't know about operational realities, things that frontline employees don't understand about strategic decisions, things that different departments don't know about each other's challenges and successes. Smart professionals position themselves as information bridges. They make it their business to understand not just their own role, but how their work fits into the larger organizational strategy. They build relationships that give them insights into different departments, different levels of the hierarchy, and different aspects of the business. Look at how Sheryl Sandberg built her career before joining Facebook as COO. At Google, she didn't just excel at her specific responsibilities in online sales and operations. She made it her business to understand Google's overall strategy, its competitive challenges, and its growth opportunities. This broad knowledge base made her invaluable to senior leadership and positioned her for advancement. When Facebook was looking for an experienced executive to help scale the company, Sandberg's reputation as someone who understood both operational details and strategic big picture made her the obvious choice. Her information advantage, understanding how fast-growing technology companies actually operate, was exactly what Facebook needed at that stage of its development. This principle also applies to industry knowledge. The most successful people don't just stay current with developments in their own companies. They understand broader industry trends, regulatory changes, technological developments, and competitive dynamics that might affect their sector. Consider how successful investors approach markets. They don't just look at stock prices or company financials. They study demographic trends, regulatory changes, technological innovations, and geopolitical developments that might create opportunities or threats years before they become obvious to the general public. Ray Dalio, founder of Bridgewater Associates, built the world's largest hedge fund by systematizing this approach to information gathering and analysis. Bridgewater doesn't just collect information randomly. They have systematic processes for identifying what information is most likely to be valuable, how to verify its accuracy, and how to act on insights before competitors recognize the same patterns. In your own career, developing an information advantage might mean subscribing to industry publications that your colleagues don't read. It might mean attending conferences or networking events where you can learn about trends before they become mainstream. It might mean building relationships with people in adjacent industries who can give you insights into developments that will eventually affect your sector. The key is being systematic about information gathering rather than random. Identify the 3 to 5 types of information that are most likely to create opportunities in your field, then develop reliable sources for staying ahead of those trends. Strategic information gathering also means understanding the difference between data and insight. Anyone can collect information, but successful people develop the ability to recognize patterns and implications that others miss. They ask better questions, they make connections between seemingly unrelated developments, and they think through second and third-order effects of current trends. Most importantly, they understand that information without action is worthless. The goal isn't to become a trivia expert about your industry. It's to identify actionable insights that allow you to make better decisions than your competitors. Chapter 5. The Art of Strategic Positioning, Making Yourself Indispensable. Machiavelli understood that survival and advancement depend not just on being good at what you do, but on being positioned so that others need you to succeed. This principle of strategic positioning is perhaps the most important factor in determining who rises to positions of influence and who remains replaceable. Consider how Indra Nooyi transformed her career at PepsiCo. When she joined the company in 1994, she could have focused on excelling within her specific role in strategic planning. Instead, she positioned herself as the person who understood both the financial implications of strategic decisions and the operational realities of implementing them. Nooyi made herself indispensable by becoming the bridge between different parts of the organization that traditionally didn't communicate effectively. She understood that in large corporations, the biggest problems often arise not from lack of talent or resources, but from lack of coordination between different functions and departments. By positioning herself as the person who could translate between finance and operations, between short-term pressures and long-term strategy, between different geographic markets and cultural contexts, Nooyi became increasingly valuable to senior leadership. When PepsiCo needed a CEO who could navigate the company through changing consumer preferences and global expansion, she was the obvious choice. This approach, positioning yourself as the solution to organizational problems rather than just another skilled employee, is how ordinary professionals become indispensable leaders. Look at how Satya Nadella positioned himself within Microsoft before becoming CEO. Instead of trying to compete directly with more senior executives in traditional power centers like Windows or Office, Nadella focused on emerging areas like cloud computing and enterprise services that were becoming increasingly important to Microsoft's future. When the board was looking for a new CEO, they needed someone who understood both Microsoft's traditional strengths and the new directions the company needed to pursue. Nadella had positioned himself perfectly. He understood the legacy business, but was also the leader of Microsoft's fastest-growing new initiatives. Strategic positioning also means understanding how to make yourself valuable to the people who make advancement decisions. This doesn't mean office politics in the negative sense. It means understanding what keeps your superiors awake at night and positioning yourself as part of the solution. Successful professionals identify the biggest challenges facing their organization or industry, then systematically develop the skills and knowledge needed to address those challenges. They volunteer for difficult projects that others avoid. They build expertise in areas that are becoming increasingly important, but where the organization lacks depth. Consider how successful people approach economic downturns or industry disruptions. While others focus on protecting their current positions, strategic thinkers see these challenges as positioning opportunities. They develop skills that will be essential for navigating the new environment. They build relationships with people who are likely to be important in the post-disruption landscape. Warren Buffett famously said, "Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful." This advice applies beyond investing. It's about recognizing that periods of uncertainty and change create positioning opportunities for those brave enough to act, while others are paralyzed. Reed Hastings demonstrated this when he decided to cannibalize Netflix's profitable DVD business to focus on streaming. While competitors and critics focused on the short-term revenue loss, Hastings understood that positioning Netflix as the leader in streaming would create sustainable competitive advantages that would be worth far more than protecting the declining DVD business. Strategic positioning also requires understanding your unique value proposition, the combination of skills, knowledge, relationships, and perspectives that you bring that others cannot easily replicate. This isn't about being the best at any single thing, but about being uniquely valuable due to your particular combination of capabilities. The most successful people often aren't the most talented in any single area, but they have unusual combinations of skills that make them irreplaceable for specific types of challenges. They might combine technical expertise with business understanding, or deep industry knowledge with cross-cultural communication skills, or analytical capabilities with creative problem-solving approaches. In your own career, strategic positioning might mean identifying the intersection between your natural strengths and emerging organizational needs. It might mean volunteering for cross-functional projects that give you broader perspective. It might mean developing expertise in areas where your organization currently lacks depth, but will need capabilities in the future. The key is thinking beyond your current role to understand how you can become increasingly valuable as your organization and industry evolve. Machiavelli understood that princes who only focused on current threats missed opportunities to position themselves for future challenges and opportunities. Chapter 6. The Calculated Risk. When Fortune Favors the Strategically Bold. Machiavelli wrote that fortune is the arbiter of half our actions, but she allows us to control the other half. This insight captures one of the most crucial aspects of advancement: understanding when and how to take calculated risks that others are too cautious to attempt. The key word here is calculated. Machiavellian risk-taking isn't about being reckless or gambling with your future. It's about developing the ability to assess opportunities that others overlook or avoid, and having the strategic thinking to pursue them when the potential rewards justify the risks. Consider how Sarah Blakely built Spanx into a billion-dollar company. When she was working as a door-to-door fax machine salesperson, she could have continued in stable employment, gradually working her way up in traditional sales careers. Instead, she identified a problem that affected millions of women, but that established fashion companies were ignoring: the need for better undergarments that worked with contemporary clothing styles. Blakely's risk wasn't impulsive. She spent 2 years researching the industry, understanding manufacturing processes, and testing her ideas before leaving her job. She saved money to fund initial production, developed relationships with manufacturers, and created a business plan that minimized her financial exposure while maximizing her potential for success. When she finally launched Spanx, it wasn't a blind leap. It was a calculated risk based on thorough preparation and strategic thinking. The risk paid off because she had done the analytical work to understand both the opportunity and the potential pitfalls. This approach to risk-taking separates successful entrepreneurs and executives from those who either never take meaningful risks or who take foolish risks that destroy their careers. Strategic risk-taking requires understanding not just what you might gain, but what you can afford to lose and how to minimize potential downsides. Look at how Elon Musk approached his various ventures. When he sold PayPal, he could have invested his wealth in safe, traditional investments and lived comfortably for the rest of his life. Instead, he chose to risk his fortune on SpaceX and Tesla, industries where many previous entrepreneurs had failed spectacularly. But Musk's risks weren't reckless gambling. He spent enormous amounts of time studying aerospace engineering and automotive manufacturing. He assembled teams of industry experts. He developed business plans that addressed the specific reasons why previous attempts had failed. He structured his investments to maximize learning and minimize catastrophic loss. Even when SpaceX and Tesla faced near bankruptcy, Musk had positioned himself to learn from setbacks rather than be destroyed by them. Each failure provided information that made subsequent attempts more likely to succeed. This approach to risk, Viewing potential failures as expensive education rather than catastrophic endpoints allowed him to persist when others would have given up. Strategic risk-taking also applies to career decisions. The professionals who advance fastest are often those who volunteer for challenging assignments that others avoid, who take roles in emerging business areas where success isn't guaranteed, or who move to organizations where they can have bigger impact but face greater uncertainty. Consider how executives navigate career transitions. The safest path is often to move between similar roles at similar companies, gradually working up traditional hierarchies. But the most successful executives often make lateral moves that give them broader experience, take roles in turnaround situations where they can demonstrate problem-solving abilities, or join smaller companies where they can have greater impact. These moves involve risk. There's no guarantee that the turnaround will succeed, that the smaller company will grow, or that the new industry will develop as expected. But successful executives understand that the biggest career risk is often playing it too safe, becoming too comfortable in predictable situations that don't develop their capabilities or demonstrate their potential. Jeff Bezos exemplifies this strategic approach to risk. When he left his successful career on Wall Street to start Amazon, he wasn't making an impulsive decision. He had identified the explosive growth of internet usage and recognized that e-commerce represented a massive opportunity that traditional retailers were too slow to capture. Bezos developed what he called a regret minimization framework, imagining himself at age 80 and considering whether he would regret not pursuing the opportunity more than he would regret trying and failing. This mental exercise helped him distinguish between risks worth taking and comfortable situations worth leaving behind. The framework also helped him prepare for the challenges he would face. Instead of assuming everything would go perfectly, Bezos planned for multiple scenarios, including extended periods of losses, while building market share and infrastructure. In your own career, strategic risk-taking might mean volunteering for high-visibility projects where failure would be public, but success would accelerate your advancement. It might mean proposing solutions to problems that previous leaders have avoided addressing. It might mean joining organizations or industries that are facing disruption, but where your skills could create significant value. The key is developing your ability to assess risks accurately rather than avoiding them entirely. Machiavelli understood that princes who never take risks eventually find themselves displaced by those who are willing to act when opportunities arise. Chapter 7. The Long Game: Building Sustainable Power and Influence. Machiavelli's ultimate insight was that true power comes not from winning individual battles, but from building systems and relationships that create sustainable advantage over time. This final principle ties together everything we've discussed: strategic patience, calculated relationships, information advantages, positioning, and smart risk-taking, into a coherent approach for building lasting success. Consider how Warren Buffett has approached building Berkshire Hathaway. He didn't try to get rich quickly through flashy investments or aggressive trading strategies. Instead, he built a system for identifying undervalued companies, acquiring them at reasonable prices, and holding them long enough for their true value to be recognized by the market. This approach required enormous patience. Some of Buffett's best investments didn't pay off for decades. It required building relationships with management teams who shared his long-term perspective. It required developing information sources that helped him identify opportunities before they became obvious to other investors. Most importantly, it required resisting the temptation to abandon his systematic approach when short-term pressures mounted or when other strategies seemed to be working better. Buffett understood that sustainable success comes from consistently applying proven principles rather than chasing whatever seems to be working at the moment. This long-term thinking is what separates those who achieve lasting influence from those who have brief moments of success followed by decline. Building sustainable power requires thinking in decades rather than quarters, in career arcs rather than individual promotions, in legacy impact rather than immediate recognition. Look at how Bill Gates transitioned from Microsoft founder to global philanthropist. Instead of viewing these as separate phases of his life, Gates understood that the skills, relationships, and resources he developed building Microsoft could be strategically applied to addressing global health and education challenges. Gates didn't just donate money randomly to charitable causes. He applied the same systematic, long-term thinking that made Microsoft successful. He identified problems where technology and business principles could create scalable solutions. He built partnerships with governments, universities, and other organizations. He measured results and adjusted strategies based on evidence rather than good intentions. This strategic approach to philanthropy has allowed Gates to have greater impact on global health and education than traditional charitable giving would have achieved. More importantly, it has positioned him as a thought leader on global development issues, creating influence that extends far beyond his financial contributions. The principle here is that sustainable power comes from building systems rather than achieving individual victories. Systems create compounding returns. Each success builds on previous successes, creating momentum that becomes increasingly difficult for competitors to match. Consider how successful people approach their personal brands and professional reputations. Instead of focusing on individual achievements or seeking immediate recognition, they think systematically about how to build credibility and influence over time. They identify the 3 to 5 key messages they want to be known for, then consistently communicate those messages through their work, their public speaking, their writing, and their professional relationships. They understand that reputation is built through consistent behavior over extended periods, not through isolated moments of brilliance. Strategic long-term thinking also means understanding that sustainable success requires adapting to changing circumstances while maintaining core principles. The most successful people and organizations are those that can evolve their tactics while staying true to their fundamental strategic advantages. Netflix exemplifies this adaptive approach. Reed Hastings understood that the company's core advantage wasn't DVD by mail or streaming technology. It was the ability to understand and predict consumer entertainment preferences better than competitors. This insight allowed Netflix to successfully transition from DVDs to streaming to original content production, always staying ahead of industry changes while building on their fundamental competitive advantages. Amazon demonstrates similar long-term strategic thinking. Jeff Bezos understood that Amazon's core advantage wasn't selling books or even e-commerce. It was building systems for efficiently delivering whatever customers wanted. This insight allowed Amazon to expand into cloud computing, artificial intelligence, logistics, and entertainment while maintaining their fundamental strategic position. If you've absorbed these 7 principles, strategic patience, calculated relationships, information advantages, smart positioning, strategic risk-taking, and long-term thinking, you have the foundation for understanding how power actually works in the modern world. These aren't theoretical concepts. They're practical tools that successful people use every day to advance their positions and increase their influence. The question now is whether you're ready to start applying these principles in your own life. Success requires more than understanding. It requires consistent application over extended periods, even when the immediate results aren't obvious. Comment legacy below if you're committed to thinking strategically about building sustainable success rather than just chasing short-term gains. Let me know you're ready to start playing the long game that separates those who achieve lasting influence from those who wonder why opportunities always seem to go to someone else.